live in kind of a invisible exoskeleton of data and interconnectedness, and everything we do, everything we touch is part of the web of interconnectedness of all things.
How vulnerable are things in America? Who are they vulnerable to? Could just anyone out there with a desire to wreak havoc just go do that?
It is a terrorist attack. It's the type of terrorist attack that this world hasn't really seen yet. We're trying to find out the clues, the fingerprints, like forensics, but in cyber.
Liaise with them?
We go head to head with the Chinese on their cyber intrusion every day. Not a bad idea to be face to face working with them.
We need a man named Hathaway.
What do we know about this guy?
He's a convicted hacker serving 15 years. Genius coder. If we want to move around within this code, looking for clues to the hacker's identity, we need
Nicholas Hathaway.
A small liaison group was put together with a Chinese network engineer, Tang Wei, her brother, who works in cyber defense within the PLA, an FBI agent, Viola Davis, and a convicted black hat hacker who has unusual expertise, and that's Hathaway.
So someone had to physically enter this room, plug the virus in. We did a few months of computer lessons. I mean, that was kind of the #1 thing for me to wrap my head around or, get skillful with. Right, this is the code for our rat. It's compact, it's slick, under a meg. You would never picked up on it.
We worked on how hackers speak, how they carry themselves. How do they type? What does it sound like? How they address a computer.
Section of his code right here is a mess. There's 25 lines. He's left text. Are they notes to himself?
dead end ideas.
Maybe he's still writing.
He's busy writing code for what's next.
There can be some hints to who does what by the types of, I would call them artifacts that are in the code, the choices that they make when they write code. It's very creative. It's sort of a combination of creative and logic.
When you're the composer, when you're the architect, you take pride in the work that you do, in the elegance of it, or the economy of the code, and everyone will write in a different way.
So sometimes they put a shout out to someone in a comment to the code, and that's just plain text, that's saying, hey, I wrote this.
There's a way of speaking or writing that is specific to that subculture, and that kind of decentralization of trust in those kinds of social networks where they're not going to talk to you unless you've been vetted by someone they trust. And there's also a certain amount of competitiveness.
All 3 accounts.
Wire transfers to a Macau casino.
They're cashing out.
We're going to check out.
Who is a black hat hacker? And what's his action? What's the exalted experience for him? The purely mental adventure of projecting something you want to do, to be able to extend himself through the internet, through the abstraction of 1 and 0s, and being able to have a kinetic effect someplace else in the world. You're causing something in the physical material world to happen because of your ability to manipulate code.
He hit 4 major banks, ran up $46 million in damages, and that's just what we know about? You want the DOJ to do anything other than laugh?
What we're seeing and what we're dealing with in this film is the ability of hackers to go from the world of pure information into the world of what they call the kinetic world. The computer components that control pumps, the electric grid,
Yeah, what do we have that looks like?
and anything that operates in the physical world, that sort of thing.
Black hat hackers penetrate places they're not supposed to go. The first thing you find out is that the stereotype's all wrong. They're not just a lot of middle-class, skinny little white kids. It's Alberto Gonzalez. It's Stephen Watt, who's a 7-foot-tall, weightlifting brainiac, surfer-type looking guy. It's everybody. Ready, and action behind the gate. Hathaway's trajectory is actually common. If you look at the life stories of the top 10 hackers in the last 10 years, some haven't had formal education, became hackers, did time, and now they're teaching at MIT, it's computer sciences. It's all over the place.
Hacking is fun. It's like getting involved in a really good chess game. Combined with being a real cat and mouse game with an opponent and having some risk involved, so there's an adrenaline rush as well. It's a very potent combination.
When you're hacking, it's kind of an opiated feedback loop, and you lose sense of time, and you're totally immersed in the world you're in. We had various people working with us. Kevin Paulson, former hacker who did 5 years in prison, is now an editor at Wired magazine.
It was hacking the phone company, but because I worked for a defense contractor, the FBI began treating it as a national security investigation. I went on the run, used my phone company access to cheat at radio station phone-in contests so I could make sure I was the right caller to win $30,000 in cash or a car. I was in probably 8 different jails over the course of the 5 years. And it ranged from being surrounded by mostly white-collar criminals to sometimes being surrounded by more violent criminals or, in a couple of cases, murder defendants. So it was I got a little bit of everything.
Michael found me because of a project I did hacking a dating website. I didn't actually break any laws. I just reverse engineered it, and I ended up going on a lot of dates, as a result of it. I think on the basis of that, I started tutoring Chris in some of the areas of computer science that were relevant to the film.
And I'd be like, yeah, we'll do that later. So listen, what's the coolest thing you've hacked into? Tell me your story. How can you do this? And it was all the kind of illegal things that we'd end up discussing.
Come on, they got the keys to the kingdom. Our guy's address, maybe. Whatever he's cooking up next is right in there. Only we can't read it.
Let's go. You locate this guy, you're okay. You get discovered, you're dead meat. You know that, don't you?
You asked him to change his password?
Phishing, that's something that Hathaway is supposedly very good at. If I can get you to click on a link, that's great. If I can get you to click on like a PDF, that's even better, that's great.
When he downloaded the PDF, what he downloaded was the keylogger.
Because then I can put a piece of software in your computer. And now I'm in your computer.
Got it.
I tend to be attracted to newly developing ways we live our lives. And when something as seismic as the digital age is upon us and it changes the nature and fabric of everything, that's very interesting to me. There are very few pieces of technology that actually do change us. Printing press is one, computers and the internet are another.
Look at this. 53 PLCs, 5 different tin mines.
When I get interested in a subject like this, I want to find out all I can about it. That takes me into a series of meetings that I set up with people who are expert in it, folks at the Department of Homeland Security, FBI. Mike Rogers is running the Congressional Intelligence Committee.
That malware was on those systems. Do the lights go out? Do we stop pumping water? Does that mean they already had the capability to flip the switch if they wanted to?
There shouldn't be any doubt in our minds that there are nation states and groups out there that have the capability to do that, to enter our systems and to shut down our basic infrastructure.
He was very, very active and very, very early about warning about the threat of cyber intrusions, particularly into defense industries, technology, the appropriation of intellectual property. mainly from China.
The Mandiant report that attributed to the Chinese government hackers being on some of our critical infrastructure systems. Is there any other nation state?
There is more than one nation state out there that we watch that we believe has these capabilities.
It's a kind of Cold War. All the sides have gotten very good at it. So we, the US, hack China and we hack Russia, and really we hack to some degree almost every country on Earth. And China and Russia hack us as well. Everybody involved is developing highly engineered pieces of malicious software and people that work full-time doing nothing but refining that code.
为这个有下载核的恶意软件打开了后门。
是敲诈吗？要钱吗？
不是。
It's been fairly well established that the Chinese People's Liberation Army has task force the size of a small software company whose main purpose is to get inside of networks and stay there.
The story we heard was always the same story, that the American public has no idea how porous we are.
From our water to our power to our financial segment to the aviation industry, just as examples.
Anybody who's smart enough with a fast enough computer can get into any of it with complete anonymity and impunity.
He's got 74 million in cash. He's writing code. What for? He stood here, right here. I looked at this.
A black hat hacker, he wants to make something happen. And the larger that thing is, the more gratification there is.
Here's the money from Chicago, deposited into a local bank. Bank Centra Agatas.
Hacking is completely international now. These are not hackers in their parents' basements. These are professionals.
It's anybody, any guy sitting on a sofa anywhere in the world. He could be in Estonia, he could be in Lagos, Mumbai, any place. It's as if we are living in a house and all the doors and windows are open and it's a very dangerous neighborhood, but we don't know it.
I can target anyone, anything, anywhere.
There are no secrets anymore. The journey that Hathaway and his partner find themselves on is going to project them into 74 locations in 4 foreign countries. So it's logistically challenging, but what you wind up doing is you go to Malaysia or Indonesia or Hong Kong, and it's very specific. It's like a core sample. We go way deep.
Michael will always take a location over a set because each of these worlds was unique in its culture, it was unique in its geography, in its architecture, and in its color spectrum.
You quickly realize, oh no, nothing's by accident with Michael. And he said that right from the beginning, that the film wasn't going to look like, anything else.
We had some particular locations that were fascinating. One was Hong Kong. They launch a quest to identify and apprehend a cyber criminal somewhere in the world. Following the money takes them there.
Loved Hong Kong. It was a different character in and of itself. The number of people, the small, tight spaces, the smells, the look.
Little parks with stainless steel railings and special tiles so that older people can walk on them and massage their feet.
I love the heat. I love what the heat made us do, the sweating, the feeling of claustrophobia.
The insane amount of detail per square foot, this almost Lego type aesthetic.
It's a massive compression of humanity into a very small amount of space.
Hong Kong was such an impressive city. I'd never been there before, and I went, wow, there's so much to see here.
what you would see on, for example, billboards out of the windows of the apartments was always carefully selected and very carefully designed by Michael to tell the story of how I think he saw Hong Kong.
You're in the room and you're shooting this thing and you realize all the stuff that's going on in the background through the window, the neon lights and the sounds and the movements of the city around that area. It has that same sort of like, oh, there's something different about this. I haven't seen it before.
The challenge was always, okay, show me what you're going to show me, and I'm going to discard it because this is probably what you show everybody else. Let's see what's really out there. Let's see what other directors haven't seen.
He was able to find, those places that nobody would ever think about. It's like in Heat, we all saw a side and a color to LA that we'd never seen before. And I certainly didn't suspect it even existed. And there he was finding those places in Hong Kong.
By scouting on the water, we saw this thing. It looked like a display of Brancusi sculpture. So what is that? And it was the outflow of a storm drain.
Okay, ready, and action.
It said all sorts of smells which none of us recognized and none of them were good. And
it was incredible, right? And you'd look up the steps, the huge steps going into blackness where all this water would come rushing down, and you could sense the power, you could sense the violence that happened in that place. And no accident, we were there.
You're over there, and you guys, you start coming back.
The access to the bottom of it was through a 6-story helical ramp. It was totally sculptural, and it was a fantastic location.
Locate this guy, you're okay. You get discovered, you're dead meat.
At a critical moment in time, Hathaway has to do a huge roll of the dice. So I wanted a place that was as alien an environment that I could find to put them in. And the isolation that I imagined them being in was very dramatic. That projects them into a strange part of Malaysia called Perak.
Here, right here, I looked at this.
Where there's a lunar landscape of tin mines.
John goes, I say action, and you continue.
From there to the heart of Jakarta, Indonesia. The largest Muslim country in the world. There's nothing Western about it. It's a really exciting place with crazy colors that come from different ethnic groups' traditions. The brilliant primaries of the Bugis, the boats in Kota Harbor, for example.
This extraordinary bridge in Jakarta was going to become the electronics market.
First time we went to the column, it's beautiful.
Michael wanted these specific local colors.
And then suddenly we saw some of them is repainted.
And the locals painted over all these beautiful colors into just white.
When I saw that, I said, holy mama, I'm in big trouble. The local people heard about foreigners coming in to shoot, so they want to make it look beautiful. And luckily, I'm dealing with a senior director who have definitely dealt that kind of experience before, Michael at that time just asked, can you stop? And then let's repaint what's already the damage. And that's why it worked quite okay.
Five men, 2 floors below.
We're in this skeleton of a building. I think we're up on the 18th floor. And because it was the night of transition from Ramadan to Eid, the fireworks started going up. There was the beautiful sound of the call to prayer. It was breathtaking. I like working with Michael. He takes you to such pretty parts of the world.
You go from this digital tech world into one of the most beautiful ceremonial traditions of Indonesia. It looks just spectacular.
For the working out of their fate and the very aggressive lethal hunt that they're engaged in. I wanted to find something that was completely opaque. So there's a Balinese holiday called Nyepi Day, and we restaged that in a square in downtown Jakarta that's called Independence of Papua Square, which is a monumental piece of architecture given to Sukarno by the Soviets.
Most people haven't seen anything like that, let alone to that scale. Most films would have said, oh, let's get 200 extras and we'll CGI masses of people, but Michael said, no, no, no.
We restaged this giant celebration with about 5,000 people, and Colleen Atwood built all these costumes, totally authentic, and they all construct and bring various demons on palanquins that they carry. That's about 40 men to carry one of these things.
Michael responded immediately to the demonic characters. They're designed in a way that they give this appearance of floating, but in very dynamic poses. The sort of very expressive faces, the large eyes, these were all things that he knew as a filmmaker would show up very well at night, using nothing but firelight.
And you look at this and you have no idea what's going on. And that's the idea.
There's a truth-telling style we all have, or, you know, as Michael says, whether or not consciously you know it, your subconscious is clued into what's right or wrong or what's truthful. That's the way Michael works. It's always, how can we make it that bit better or squeeze some more truth out of it? How much further into this can we go?
And action.
This is our actor's home IP address, his home server. He's not in Mumbai, not in Minneapolis, not in Riga. He is in Jakarta.
Can you crack the site?
No. HRM is a hosting company, like a hotel or a Swiss bank, exclusively for black hat hackers, so it's bulletproof.
Part of the excitement of making films for me is that you get to take yourself in a world you're really fascinated with, and you get to explore it in depth, rapidly. I always feel I have to know something about an area before I can figure out who the players are. To me, it'd be a cheat to have a preconceived story and then put it within a milieu instead of authentically being inside the milieu and finding out what kind of people these are, how they think, how they walk, how they talk, how they dress, who are they.
I know you, and you're about money, because it's your scoreboard in the virtual world.
When you do that immersive kind of research, characters show up.
You know, I signed on to the film and I was in Australia at the time, and he said, I need you to be in Chicago at, 2nd of May or something. And I said, I'm in Australia. He said, well, you have to come back early because we have to go to the steel mill and see where you grew up. And this is 2.5 months before we started shooting.
I thought that Hathaway should be the son of a steelworker, living on the south side of Chicago, working in the mills in Gary, Indiana. Went to work at 5 in the morning in a blast furnace.
You said this is where your father worked. This is the kind of people you would have grown up with, and you might have worked here part-time at some stage.
Hathaway went to MIT on scholarship and loans. While in school, he got into a jam that turned into an assault and a prosecution. He probably emulated his father, who he had a very close relationship with, and refused to cut a deal. I took Chris to Statesville prison. That was a fascinating experience for him to try and get some sense of what his life would have been inside for 4 years.
Hathaway, cell search. Hands
You know, the first time I walked in, you immediately kind of go, wow, this is a whole nother world here. Its own set of rules and an incredibly intimidating and scary place. I've never had that kind of extensive background given to me like that. You then have to sort of sift through it and, you know, wrap your head around it. It was hugely helpful.
You think you're playing someone who's a peripheral character, and that might be the case. Nonetheless, you get an email with this complete backstory that's been fully researched and written out by Michael.
Qassar is a product of the interminable civil wars in Lebanon, acquiring skills in urban combat, which became a professional kind of a commodity that he could market.
The guy we're working will drop the big hammer and not think twice about it. And then
Come on. Don't evoke 9/11 on me.
You didn't lose anyone there, Stanley. Slow it down. Right? Slow it down. The figuring out who I was an absolute journey. It was a difficult one. Probably one of the most difficult journeys I've taken with a director.
Gun.
One of the most impressive women I know is a lady named Michelle Leonard, who's the head of the DEA. She's an extraordinary woman.
Michael had me fly to Washington, D.C. to meet the head of the DEA. It was two women sitting down in an office talking, but her air of intelligence and authority was just in her.
You're requesting I turn over records to the FBI and a foreign power on thousands of private brokers and traders. I'm afraid I can't possibly come.
And also a passionate, singular feeling of wanting to do good. In the next 15 seconds, I call Laura Greer at the Commodities Trading Commission, and I say, Laura, how you doing? I'd like to launch an official investigation on one Gary Baker. So the headline, M-Tech official investigated for aiding and abetting cyber criminals, leaks to CNN in the next 90, so it makes the 3 o'clock news cycle as well as the nightly news, and that'd be good too. Only after I took the part, then the stories came out. The number of takes, and the beauty of doing all of those takes is you have 10, 15 different choices at the end of the day. Depending on how the movie is cut and what choice he makes, it could fit into the movie in a totally different way than you could possibly have imagined if you just said it the way you felt like it should be said. Am I being tangible? After a while, I liked it. Gary? I did. It woke me up out of my haze, which is just doing something by rote.
The Chinese network engineer, Chen Lien, is played by Tang Wei. There's a lot of similarities between the character Lien and Tang Wei in life. She's candid, she's very independent, a woman who speaks her mind.
Tell me, what is it I'm supposed to start seeing so fast?
Where you are?
What, Koreatown? What?
You'll be in the rapid stream of decision-making, having to make intuitive choices. People against you are high-speed, world-class, dangerous.
She's either on the set observing, or she's in her hotel room by herself for 2 days, 2 nights, thinking. You know, she really just moves into that role and becomes that person and just wants to live there. And it's not out of discipline, it's sheer pleasure for her. If you were going to program an actress, you would come up with Tang Wei.
I like to do it again, because I always waiting for him to give me tip. Maybe I can not show.
Yeah, even though it says
Tip about feeling, about the characters.
his reaction.
Yes.
It won't come.
Because that kind of thing need to melt into yourself, melt into your blood, and then it become the reaction, the acting.
You never know what's gonna happen or how many takes we're gonna do. And when you start to do a lot of takes, you think, okay, what am I doing wrong? And then you kind of get to a place where you don't know where the scene's going. There's a freedom to it. You just sort of let go because you have to.
This was found in your cell.
Looking back at the interrogation scene, it was that experience where I was just swimming.
Is this the attack tool?
And watching it back, I think everything I've ever watched back in the past of something I've done, I've known where it was heading. In this, I was watching it going, I don't remember this take. I don't know where this is headed.
I used it to call Santa in the North Pole and told him to do Christmas early this year.
You exhaust trying to hit a mark, because we see you trying to hit a mark then. You stop playing the end of the scene or a certain point of the scene. It becomes a lot more honest, and you start then noticing all the changes and movements of the other character in the set. So it was a huge learning curve for me.
Chris, he responds to challenge. He's physical in his life, both as a surfer and a kickboxer.
Ready, set, and action.
There was something adventurous, the freedom that he feels to navigate his own course, forging his own path through the world. And I felt that I'm sitting with this guy, and I'm sitting with Hathaway.
You got a zoom on there or not? Put a longer lens on and let it be bumpy, but then it'll get smooth when they stop. Okay?
Michael Mann is a master of creating reality on film. It's so believable.
Just move slowly and see all of it. Yeah, move, pan right. Grillo, don't slide around. Just get me the whole tableau of this stuff.
Just us being there on set, I believed it. The ambulances, the burn victims, the hundreds of extras, all the medics dressed in those hazmat suits. Every single process was exactly how it would be if something like this happened.
Julie Atwood is a nuclear waste management consultant, and in setting up the response at the nuclear reactor, she was absolutely key.
Try to peel the suit back.
In terms of the procedures for putting on protective garments, the training of the nurses and technicians, it was all very authentic.
This set's all about showing some of the reality. A lot of workers get hurt, a lot of them get sick, they get radiation illness. You'd have injuries like you would get on a construction site, along with radiation burns.
How would the burns look? We saw all these pictures of real burn victims. Those were recreated by the makeup artists.
Michael Mann wanted 2 nuclear blast victims, dead victims inside. So the actors actually see what they're going into.
It was a scary thing.
Michael will be standing in the middle of the set, and you can see it. You can see in front of his eyes. There are these vast tableaus and the minutest of details. What follows thereafter is this muscular effort, and it is a muscular effort to recreate that, to impose that on the world around him.
He demands a lot, but he's giving twice what anyone else is given, you know. He's literally sprinting across the set. I see him sprinting across the set and back again, and you know.
I dispatched 2 SWAT team guys. I have to grab one of him, holding him like that, with my arm around his neck. And we had to go through many takes because there was an exact placement of that hand that Michael wanted. No, Richie, the fingers are too splayed. No, Richie, the fingers are too bent. And I asked him, where do you want the thumb? Do you want the thumb like this, or do you want the thumb out? It's like, why are you asking me about the thumb? The thumb's unimportant. There's exact placement that for Michael denoted skill and years of experience.
Michael really wanted to emphasize that we were the underdogs. And there we are, having a screwdriver and a grinder and sanding the thing down to make it into a weapon. He's wrapping magazines around his stomach to protect himself. And a lot of it was stuff that's pulled from, I think, prison. This is where Michael's taken it from. How guys prepare if there's going to be some kind of fight.
It's all about if I can get close enough, fast enough.
Now we're here, but up until that final bit, yeah, I got to be a little more proactive. It's certainly the most prep and work I've done, but hugely beneficial. I'm circling, going,
I don't think
who's around me, trying to. As soon as I'm flat-footed, I'm a still target. It made me think about how I have prepped in the past and the will in the future.
all of that.
Yeah. We see him, and then there was a perfect moment. Before you know it, it affects you in some way, and you start to move differently. And you get on set then, it's that extra bit of confidence that I know who this guy is. I'm not trying to fake it. It becomes a part of you, or you become a part of it, and it's great.
Cut.